Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but I would say that this brewery are known mainly for their New England hazy IPAs, and the brewer in particular is very well respected here in Sweden for this particular style. But yeah, the one we're going to have a look at today is the latest edition to a series that has only appeared on the channel once before. I enjoyed it last time, so I have to say I'm very curious to see how it turns out this time, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days, and for this review we are going to return to OO Brewing once again. So today we're going to have a look at my second beer from their Ichor series. This one comes in at 8% ABV. It's a New England double IPA as we had last time, but this one is the Ichor Ekuanot. So Ekuanot, as you know, is an American hop. It comes in about 14% alpha acid, and it's a big limey leaning thing, this one. So yeah, very curious to see what it has in store for us. The last beer that we had in this series, of course, was the Ichor Citra. That did turn out to be very nice, and I do have to say I enjoy these sort of, how do you say, these kind of hoppy examination series type beers, as I would call them, from OO Brewing. We have, of course, have the 100 series from these guys, the single hopped New England IPAs, and then we have the 50-50 dual hopped New England IPAs. I always enjoy doing these ones. I'm a big ingredients nerd, as I've told you on the channel before, so doing these kinds of reviews from OO Brewing are always fun. But this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget for June of 2021, and the thing about the Ichor series is that they use dry hopping, cryo hops and pellets in these things. That is what defines the Ichor series at OO Brewing. But yeah, looking forward to this. As I said earlier, I hope that it's another interesting beer. I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it, but let's crack on with this one then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from OO Brewing before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future because this is a brewery that I keep an eye on. And as always, you can check out all the usual social media down in the video description below as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about OO Brewing once again. So OO Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up there on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2011 by Olaf and Ole Andersson, who are childhood friends. But for many years these guys were also avid home brewers, so they'd always been very interested in beers. And Ola was apparently heavily involved in the Gothenburg beer scene since pre-drinking age, and he was the original brewer at Stigbergets Brewery, and this is where the older OO Brewing beers were produced. So while Ola is doing the brewing side of things, Olaf manages the business side of the brewery, and apparently they just started off making beers that they wanted to drink themselves. But this brewery really kicked off in about 2017 because in April of that year, Ola took the decision to leave Stigbergets Brewery and invested his time fully in OO, and the company invested in their own brewery in Hisingen near the Tingstedt Bridge, and it was equipped, or it still is equipped I should say, with a 2,000 litre system, and this means that they can brew up to 500,000 litres of beer per year. In the first year they brewed around 100,000 litres, and they're basically planning to expand it up to capacity over the next few years, and in 2020 they apparently brewed in the region of 300,000 litres. But they've also just taken over the premises of Bang Restaurant, and this is going to be their new tap room, and it is planned that this will open up sometime in summer of 2021. So we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully I can go and visit that at some point when I make it up to Gothenburg next time. But as of June 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 85 different kinds of beer. As I said, these guys are known mainly for their New England Hazy IPAs. Ole, of course, is known for having created the GBG Beer Week beer for 2016. Which now exists as the new and improved GBG Beer Week through Stigbergs. He also created the Amazing Haze, and roughly around the same time as Amazing Haze, he created the Narangi, of course, which was released under the OO Brewing name. So I think it's fair to say that Ole Anderson was the one who really helped kick off the New England Hazy IPA fad here in Sweden, if you like. So that is why this brewery is so highly regarded within this particular style bracket. He's a very, very well respected brewer, of course. They do other styles as well. I've had some really nice lager beers from them. I've had barley wines, I've had Scotch ales, I think. And I've also had big porters as well, actually. But yeah, try a few different styles from these guys, but probably the beers they are best known for would be the New England IPAs, and potentially my favourite one that I've had from these guys would be the Charismatico on the hazy side of things, and also the Muscles Double IPA, which is more of a West Coast IPA. That one is very, very nice as well. They re-released that a couple of months ago, in fact. But yeah, those are probably my two favourite beers that I've had from this brewery overall. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about OO Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, that is it for your history section. Let's get on and have a taste of this beer itself. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty similar compared to what we've had from OO Brewing before. It looks very, very nice. As you can see, it is pretty much the same. It is exactly the same, I think, actually. Even the letter. I thought that this was like a fancy C or something when it was the Citra one. That would actually be a nice touch, this, just to make them slightly different. Maybe they could have the, the kind of pedestals and things here, but put the different letters for the hop. Because if I am remembering it correctly, this is exactly the same as the Ichor Citra turned out to be. But yeah, as you can see on the data side of the beer, there you are. OO Brewing Ichor Ekuanot Double IPA, 8% ABV. Like I said to you earlier, this one is a New England Hazy type IPA, and they use dry hopping, pellets and cryo hops in this one. So yeah, 440 milliliter can. I want to say I paid 55 Swedish kronor for this, so that translates to roughly €5.50, about £5 sterling, and I guess somewhere in the region of $6.50 American, just to give those of you watching in different places a little bit of a price reference. But as you can see, gold top can on this one. It should be very nice. So without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Let's go for it. As I mentioned earlier, Ekuanot comes in at around 14% alpha acid. American hop usually gives you a lot of limey flavours in my experience, and probably this one along with the likes of Motueka from New Zealand, those are probably the two most popular lime forward hops, I would say. So we've got about 80% of the beer out in the glass for the moment to take a look at. This will be enough to do the aroma and the appearance of the beer, of course. Then we'll put the rest of it in before we actually have a taste of the thing. But yeah, as you can see and as you would expect, this beer has poured a lovely, I would say, kind of very light ambery leaning colour, this one. Before the head disappears, I would say that this one is a little more than 3/4 of a finger of a frothy, I would say, cream coloured head. I don't think that's a perfect white on this one. It's nice and foamy down towards the surface of the beer, but a little bit kind of bumpier further up. I think that is going to fade away to just leave a nice kind of thin foamy layer, but a thicker ring around the edge of the glass. But in terms of the colour, like I say, this one comes across as a very, very light amber. I always like comparing these New England IPAs to different kind of fruit juices and things, and I would say that this one comes across as a little bit more of, like a kind of mango and pineapple colour juice, this one of these lighter mixed tropical fruit juices. So when it comes to the colour of your beer, that's determined by 1, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. That, and you know, when it comes to a New England double IPA like this, you're talking probably a 70 to 90 minute boil, I would think. Barrel aging and adjuncts will play a role in there as well, but those two factors are not at play when it comes to this particular beer, of course. But in terms of appearance, there's nothing particularly surprising about this one. It's got a decent level of haze to it, but I would certainly say that for an 8% New England double IPA, this one, this is not the haziest one or the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that I've come across at all. So when it comes to the haze, that's usually determined by the wheat and the oak content. The yeast will play a role in there as well. This can vary from brewery to brewery and indeed from recipe to recipe, so there's no point getting too hung up on that actually. But this certainly isn't one of the soupier and gloopier ones I've seen from OO Brewing actually, and in general either. This is definitely one of the kind of more naturally hazy leaning beers that I've come across, or New England IPAs that I've come across in recent times. We'll see when we put the last little bit of it in before we taste it, but yeah, certainly more of a kind of natural haze type vibe to this one than a full out kind of haze for days, soupy gloopy type thing. But yeah, looks the part. Certainly looks the part. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Nothing more that we really need to say about the appearance of this one, and nothing overall that is overly surprising, to be honest with you. But let's have a look at that aroma then. That smells very nice actually. In terms of the aroma straight off, the first thing I'm noticing about this beer is that it comes across as very, very grassy, and there's a lot of lime to this one. You know, you'd kind of expect that with Ekuanot, of course. It is a lime forward hop. The other thing you have to remember about New England IPAs is that these kinds of beer are very dependent on later addition hops, and this means that you're going to get more, you know, this is the point. In the wort boil, if you add the hops earlier on, that's going to give you more bitterness, which is the case in West Coast IPAs. But if you, as you progressively move through the wort boil, you get more, how would you say, you get, you know, as you move through the wort boil, you get a trade-off between bitterness and flavour and aroma. So New England IPAs tend to be more dependent on later addition hops, and you can definitely pick that up in this one, of course, as well. But yeah, it smells very, very nice, this, and it smells very, it's a very citrusy leaning New England IPA, this one, which, as I say, you would expect if you're familiar with this Ekuanot hop. Another point to note about Ekuanot is that it used to be known as Equinox, and I think there was a trademark dispute with it, of course, and that was why it was changed to Ekuanot within about a year of it having an official name, of course, because it used to have a number. I forget what the number was, but yeah, when it was still an experimental hop, it was assigned a number and things, of course. But yeah, the aroma of this one, very first impression is it's quite a kind of almost crisp New England double IPA. This one, it's got a lovely bit of a kind of grassy, citrusy quality to it, and you've got those limey notes. But let's delve into it a little bit more and kind of, you know, break it down properly. So on the malty side of things, this is quite interesting. So as always, you can smell a nice thick white bready base to the beer. There's definitely a little bit of a kind of bread crusty element in this one. And as I've told you in previous reviews, I think there's 6 different directions you can take a New England IPA in. So 1 would be being a little bit more kind of farmhousey and yeasty. 2, sort of rye leaning and grainy. 3 would be wheaty and bitey. 4 would be oaty and creamy. 5 would be kind of more bready and barley malt leaning, and then 6 would be, 5 would be, I can't count, 6 would be the more kind of caramelly and biscuity leaning sort of thing, being a little bit sweeter. But this one for me strikes me as being, it's got a good bit of wheaty bitiness to it, it's got a bit of a smoother barley malt leaning, and you can also get a bit of the kind of oaty and yeasty quality in this. And this is quite common, of course, as well, because these beers will normally display a few of these characteristics. But with this one, as I say, you've got a nice, quite soft white bready base to it. You can smell the wheat thickening it out a little bit, but at the same time the wheat's giving you a little bit of bitiness in the back of the nose, which is interesting. Definitely a bit of a smooth oaty character to this one, but I think the oats take a back seat to the wheat and the kind of bready note in the beer. And yeah, I think the malt base overall comes across as being quite smooth and wheaty in one side of on one end of the spectrum. You can definitely, as I say, smell a bit of the oats contributing to that sort of thickness and smoothness as well. But then you've also got the wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing to think about with this beer as well. But in the very kind of middle of the nose, if you like, in the middle of the nose, you can also pick up a little bit of sweetness out of this beer. And for an 8% New England double IPA, this isn't uncommon. What you get with this one is just a little touch of a kind of butter candy sort of thing. There's a little bit of a sort of Werther's original note to this one. Maybe there's even a wee touch of a very light caramel to this beer, but certainly a little bit of a butterscotchy, butter candy sort of sweetness in there. A little bit of a kind of caramelly note to it as well. Is there a wee bit of biscuit? Tempted to say that there is just a little tiny hint of a kind of biscuity cookie sort of thing coming out of this beer as well. But yeah, that is your malty side of the beer in this one. More that I smell of it, the more it kind of gets thicker and a little bit more kind of wheaty and oaty leaning actually. So quite interesting, because this one does open up a little bit the more that you smell of it. But on the hoppy side of things then, which is where the focus should be of course, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of the beer. There's a nice big floral aromatic quality to this one, which you would expect. The floral aromaticity, it's got a wee touch of spiciness to it, but it's not going to blow the head off you in terms of spiciness, I would say. But it's also got a lovely kind of zesty, grassy type quality, which is something that you should expect of Ekuanot. It does have that kind of citrusy, grassy leaning sort of thing, but it comes across as quite well balanced at the same time. It's sort of like the floral aromatic side of thing gives it a bit of depth, whereas the grassy, the sort of zestiness of the grass is the slightly more prominent aroma, I guess we could say. But on the fruity side of things, it's pretty straight shooting. It's a big, oily, limey character that's coming out of this one. Yeah, lime all the way. Maybe, you know, there's a teeny hint of like an almost kind of gooseberry note or something like that in there as well, but that's very, very minimal. It really is all about the limes in this one, and I would say that the lime, it's a little bit darker and a little bit more oily, as I say, but I think it goes together very, very well in this one. So yeah, big thumbs up to OO on the aroma of this. I think, you know, Ekuanot I don't think I've had many Ekuanot single hopped beers, so I think this is going to be very interesting. But in terms of aroma, it comes across very nicely, and it is quite different to what we've had from them before. But the pungency of the lime and the zestiness of it, I think, gives the beer a very, very nice balance. So yeah, of course, these beers for me, of course, I would say are all about, you know, ingredient education and learning about different types of hops and stuff like this. So yeah, just, you know, take a little bit of time and ponder over that aroma before you have a taste of the beer. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this beer and see how we get on. So yeah, this one is the Ichor Ekuanot double IPA, coming in at 8% ABV from OO Brewing in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Dry hopped with pellets and cryo hops, all Ekuanot. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. That's pretty damn solid, I have to say. It is a big, citrusy, zesty leaning beer, this, absolutely. It's got a good bit of bite to it as well, actually, on the first impression, but I'm going to say thumbs up to OO Brewing for this one. I'm going to say that straight away, the one kind of disadvantage, I guess, this beer has over, say, the Ichor Citra, is that Citra is probably one of the most capable hops in terms of making, you know, a single hopped IPA. Ekuanot, I don't think, is quite as capable in that regard. I mean, probably, you know, the two hops that, if people ask me about a single hopped IPA, there'd be two hops that would spring to mind, and that would be Citra and Idaho 7. You can do it with other ones and it can work quite well, but, you know, those would be the first two that would jump straight to mind. Potentially Galaxy would be a third one. But otherwise, you know, Ekuanot is not a hop that I would normally think to use as a single hop beer, this one. So that's one of the disadvantages that this has. It's potentially just not as complex on its own as the Ichor Citra was, but it still works out. It's a very nice solid beer, this one, and I always personally treat these beers as more of a kind of ingredient education sort of thing than just, you know, a drinkable, you know, just a sort of drinking beer, if that makes sense. But yeah, very rarely session beer, of course. Pretty much all the beer that I drink is on the channel here, but I think this one came across very nicely. It does come across very nicely, but it's definitely one of these more, first impression would be that it really is a more kind of citrusy, zesty leaning New England IPA, this one, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is a change of pace from what we've had over the last little while from OO Brewing, so we can say that for it. But as you always get from OO Brewing, it is pretty damn solid. So yeah, where do we start with this one then? Straight away with this beer, you can feel that nice, soft, white bready base just blanketing the middle of your tongue. That's going to be the barley malt side of things, of course. So if you focus on that middle third of your palate, you can feel that it's got a little bit of that soft white bread underneath. You can feel a little layer of wheat kind of sitting on top of that as well and sort of thickening out the bready base. And if you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, you're certainly going to get a wee touch of a kind of bread crusty element coming out of the beer, which I think is very nice too. But yeah, that sort of fruity, the fruity side of this beer really, after you take a few sips of this beer really leans towards that citrusy, zesty side of things. This beer has a hell of a potency in terms of citrusy quality, and that does start to take over the beer a little bit the more that you drink of it. But let's stay focused on the malty side of things. As I say, white bready base, smooth kind of wheaty note on top which thickens it out, bread crust either side of that on the middle third of your palate. You can definitely feel some oatiness kind of coming out of this one too, just sitting on top of that. But yeah, the malt base on this one is definitely more kind of smooth, if you like. It doesn't have as much sweetness as the aroma would give you the impression that it's going to have. And you do get a little bit of it in the beginning. So on top of the kind of oaty layer in this beer, it's almost like you've got a kind of circle in the middle of your palate. You can feel that sort of circle right in the dead centre on that middle third of your palate, and that's the oatiness there. And sitting in the middle of that, you've got a smaller circle where you get a wee bit of that. Sort of Werther's Original type thing out of this one, and it does get quite concentrated right in the dead centre of your tongue. It's almost got a little tiny bit of burn to it in a sense, and that's the alcohol coming out of the beer. This one, compared to some of the other OO Brewing beers that I've had, it doesn't quite cover its alcohol as well. I would hasten to add, but I think in some ways that sort of reflects the more kind of zesty, citrusy bite that this beer has. So that's an interesting point with this one. It's not. I can't remember exactly how the Citra Ichor came off in that sense in terms of the maltiness, because I remember what the hops were like. It was, and the hoppy vibe of this beer is quite similar, but the malty base stands out to me on this one a little bit because it's different from what we've had in other OO Brewing beers. So definitely kind of more, you can feel the wheat and the oat kind of thickening out a little bit. And this, as I say, when New England IPAs get a bit old, pardon me, they tend to do that a little bit. So you can feel that starting in this beer, but it's not. That's not to say that the beer isn't fresh, but I do notice that is one of the ways I think of telling how old a New England IPA is. But yeah, this one definitely has a bit more kind of oatiness and wheatiness to it, and it just has that slightly thicker smoothness to it in a sense. But it's definitely not one of the sweeter New Englands that I've come across from OO Brewing in a wee while. But yeah, I think in fairness, it does sweeten up a little bit more the more that your palate adjusts to this beer. So you do get a wee bit more of a kind of concentrated caramelly booziness in the middle of your palate there. So I can appreciate how that I can appreciate how that goes together in this one as well. But yeah, the middle third of your palate on this one does have a fair wee bit going on, and a few kind of points of order, a few points for thought, I guess we could say. But yeah, let's focus on the other parts of the beer then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build-up in there. You can feel a wee bit of a sort of graininess. Then on the back third of your palate, you can feel the smooth wheatiness. At the very back of the tongue, it's a little bit more bitey. You can feel there's a bit more breadiness on top of it, and I don't know if some of the oatiness kind of spreads in there as well, but the oats aren't quite as creamy in this one. They come across as a little bit thicker in a sense too. But sitting on top of that back third of your palate, of course, you get a bit of the yeastiness out of this beer, and you can feel with this one at the back third of your palate, the flavour of the beer feels a little bit taller, and it just condenses down as you move further forward in this one. Then it's a little bit more squashed together as you go into the middle third of the palate. This is a common thing that we find in a lot of beers. And so the flavour feels a bit taller on that back third of your palate, then it condenses down in the middle third of your tongue. But I think that covers the malty, yeasty elements to this beer, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, it works. It absolutely works. So on the hoppy side of things then, let's focus on that. And that's where our attention should be with this beer, of course. So in the back corners of the palate, you definitely get a wee bit of earthiness out of this one. You get this in quite a few hops though. But as you move further forward, it very quickly becomes big and green. In a sense, you get a lot of green quality out of this one. You can feel that it does almost feel a little bit piney underneath, which is interesting. At the back and just toward, just in front of that earthy part of the palate, so you can feel a sort of deep piney resin to this one. But as you move further and further forward, it's got a big sort of spicy floral aromaticity to it, which is very, very interesting. So I really like how that, I do really like how that goes about its business. So yeah, nice big floral aromaticity to this one, and a good bit of spiciness. But yeah, I think I really like how it goes together. But yeah, this beer, it kind of shows you, a lot of these hops, a lot of people don't realise, because the New England IPAs tend to be big and fruity and juicy and stuff like this. But a lot of these big high alpha acid hops, if you use them earlier on in the wort boil as well, quite a few of them can give you a hell of a spiciness. And because this is a single hop beer, that's something that you're really seeing with this, and I don't think I've seen that with Ekuanot before. So Ekuanot certainly has a bit of a piney underlining to it, but it's also got a big floral spiciness, so I need to keep this in mind going forward. This is why I like doing these different beers from OO, because you're always going to learn something about the hops, of course. So yeah, you can feel a nice big floral aromatic spiciness on the front corners of your palate. Round the front curve of the tongue, of course, it's a little bit lighter and a bit more sort of grassy and zesty. So I really like how this goes together in that beer. So yeah. Yeah, the grassiness is definitely a little bit softer, which is kind of interesting too. So that's another point to learn or to remember about Ekuanot, definitely. So big, potent, piney floral notes, but then a lighter grassy side of things, which is interesting. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity component of the beer then, the front third of your tongue. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit more of a, as you say, you get a little bit of a bready build-up and a wee bit of a grainy note again. Base of that front third of your palate is definitely more of a sort of bready quality. But then sitting on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. And for me, this one, it's all about the lime. You can get that. It's lime all the way on this. You maybe, on the front part of your palate, you maybe get a tiny little bit of underlying of a slightly more oily and sweeter gooseberry, but it's all about the lime, and the lime has a real pungent, zesty quality to it in this one. So yeah, that comes out of this beer all the way, really, really big, limey, zesty notes, and that's all across that front third of your palate. There's not even like a front half, back half divide, as you quite often find in dual hopped beers and things. This is all about the lime, and that lingers into the aftertaste. But it builds a good bridge with the sort of piney resin and the floral aromatic spice that this beer has in it. So yeah, that's a really interesting point to know about this one. But I think there's not a lot else we could say about the flavour of this beer. So I think this is another solidly done beer, but the one way that this one suffers, I think, is that Ekuanot is potentially not as good a hop for single hopping, for a single hop IPA, I should say, in comparison with Citra. So it's in a way it's sort of almost like tying one hand behind your back. I think with Ekuanot, it's just not got the same complexity to it as Citra has, or Idaho 7, or even Galaxy has. That's the issue with this beer, of course. But then they're also limited, that not many different hops are produced as cryo hops. That's the other thing with this that's going to limit this series going forward, I guess, is what hops they can get in pellets and cryo. So we'll need to see about that. I think you can get Simcoe, and I don't know what other hops you can actually get in this. So we might see an Ichor Simcoe at some stage, I would think. But we'll see how it goes. But it's certainly an interesting beer to review in a sense, and it has taught me a few things about the Ekuanot hop, I would say. But to round off the review with the mouthfeel then, it's fairly it's fairly kind of standard for a New England double IPA. It's one of the more oily and slick leaning ones that I've had in recent times. So yeah, I'd say top end and mid-bodied, smooth carbonation, leaning towards that oily and more slick end of the spectrum, which I think suits it, especially when it's a little bit more citrusy. In terms of hoppy bitterness and stuff, I think this beer is potentially about 40 or 50 IBUs. It's somewhere in this kind of region. So yeah, potentially 50 IBUs at most. I'm tempted to say 50, to be honest with you, just because of the slight, but that could just be the Ekuanot and the piney, spicy floral aromaticity that it seems to have. So yeah, I think about 50 IBUs with this one. The malt base, as I say, is quite smooth, and almost it thickens up a little bit. There's a touch of sweetness in this one, and the fruity side of the beer again is quite oily, but this one has a really big zesty kind of quality to it. So I can really appreciate that about this one, I would say. So yeah, I think it goes together very, very nicely, actually. This is an interesting beer, but as I say, I don't think, compared to the Ichor Citra that we had before, I think as a standalone beer, it's maybe not quite as good as the Ichor Citra was, but that's just because of the inherent nature of the Ekuanot hop. I don't think there's anything wrong with the brewing or the concept or whatever. I think it's just the properties of the Ekuanot hop that are not quite as well suited to a single hopped IPA as Citra would be. But yeah, definitely an interesting beer to review, and I think we can round it off there. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Definitely nice to return to OO Brewing once again and their Ichor series, which I think is going to be interesting going forward. As always, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from OO Brewing. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point soon. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I will see you guys very soon in another beer review. The Ichor Ekuanot Double IPA, 8% ABV, New England Double IPA from OO Brewing in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Slange, skull, cheers, and see you guys very, very soon.